So I'm going to steal bits from 3 presentations. These are stock slides which are adapted, which are EPSRC slides. And I've taken a few from the sort of standard pack which EPSRC provide for the ICT SAT. So EPSRC is divided into about 7 different themes or so. I'll briefly talk about those. And each theme has a SAT, what's called a strategic advisory team. And they're just a bunch of academics and other stakeholders who EPSRC bounce ideas off, essentially, and get advice from. So one of the things they did was they provided the SAT members with a set of slides, and this is one example of these slides. Not all of them really relevant today, so I've just sort of picked a few to try and explain a little bit about the EPSRC landscape and what EPSRC's plans are in the immediate future. So EPSRC is divided into a number of different themes. This one here, Information Communication Technologies, is the one that probably most concerns us. There are other ones as well. The 4 in the centre are capability themes, so they're core, if you like, research themes. Whereas the ones around the outside, like energy, health, digital economy, these are called challenge themes, so these are directed at particular challenges. And these ones in the centre tend to work through standard mode, which used to be called responsive mode. So these ones you can put proposals into at any time. These ones around the outside, and probably the ones that concern us most, are the digital economy, and I also happen to be on the digital economy SAT as well. The digital economy one tends to work more only through managed calls and through things like the 3 big hubs that they have. And recently they had a call for extending centres, and I don't think that has quite been announced yet. Okay. Within ICT, then there are 31, I call them bubbles, they're research areas. And this is how EPSRC views its portfolio, and has viewed its portfolio for a while, for about the last 4 or 5 years, ever since shaping came in. And one of the things they did with shaping was they decided which areas they were going to grow, which areas they were going to maintain, and which areas they might reduce. Right? So this is the way that EPSRC controls its portfolio, and this information goes out to all the proposers, and of course goes to all the panels, and therefore the proposers tend to shy away from these areas and tend to go more towards these areas. They do gradually change, so this one here, Pervasive and Ubiquitous Computing, changed its name recently, and was changed from a reduce area into a maintain area. So these areas are gradually reviewed and changed. The other thing is that it's not just ICT which has a chunk of these, some of the other themes have a chunk of these, and also ICT has influence on other areas within EPSRC. I don't know how many research areas there are in the whole of EPSRC. Right. Behind each of these bubbles there is a description, so if you go onto the EPSRC website, which they changed probably about a year ago in terms of the presentation of it, you can find that the best thing to do is to go straight to these research areas and look at the description behind the research areas. And behind each of the research areas, there's also a statement which says maybe how they want the area to change, if they do want the area to change. So it's really important to read that, to put it into your national importance statement, so that you are aware of what EPSRC's priorities are. So for instance, in one of the human communication and ICT, and also up here, vision, hearing and other senses, they really wanted this, for instance, to join a lot more with image and vision computing, and they have that statement in the information behind these bubbles. So it's that sort of information that you need in order to write the national importance statement.
Where do you find that again?
If you go to the EPSRC website, you will find you'll find an area which up the top there's various different categories in the top bar. One of them is research, as far as I remember. If you click on that, you get a drop down, and within there are research areas. Okay? There are also research themes.
Yeah.
All right, the research themes are things like ICT, etc. The ones I've just shown you. The research areas are these bubbles. If you go to the research areas, then there's a long list of research areas which covers the whole of EPSRC. You'll be able to look up these, and you'll then be able to click on these, and you'll get through to the statements which describe these areas. Have you managed to navigate your way, Matthew?
I've got it, yeah.
Brilliant.
Hydrogen.
Good.
That's not mine.
So I think they're all listed on the same page, so you can just do a straight search for things like human communication in ICT. So for instance, this one recently changed a bit because there was a bit of confusion between human communication in ICT and HCI. Right? And nobody really knew what the difference was between here and here.
The ubiquitous computing part.
And my own personal explanation was that the thing about HCI is it's obviously dominated very much by the big conferences such as CHI. And some people might think that HCI is synonymous with CHI, so anything which is not in CHI should not be funded, and therefore they wanted something which concentrated very much on human communication, i.e. human-to-human communication facilitated by ICT. Okay. But the thing to do is to read the statements behind the bubbles. That's important. Okay. Oh, and this sort of smudging effect, I think, was EPSRC saying that actually all of these are interrelated. The other thing, as far as I know, is there is absolutely there is nothing behind the fact that some of these are closer to one another than others. Right? So don't read anything into that. The only thing I think which is important in this diagram are the colours and the size of the bubbles. The size of the bubbles do correspond to the size of funding which EPSRC thinks they have in that area. Okay. If you look at the strategic plan, which was released in, I think, late December, then the strategic plan is a very, very, very high-level view. And it doesn't contain a great deal of information for ourselves. They will release a more detailed plan, probably, I guess, in about 6 months or so. This is, if you like, initial positioning for talking to biz, and the next more detailed plan that they come out with, which will really shape what they do in the next sort of 4 or 5 years, will come out, I guess, in about 6 months or so. But this first strategic plan is very, very high level. So it's very much a sort of visionary document rather than a detailed document. A couple of things which are picked out from here is that within this high-level plan, they want to increase the levels of multidisciplinary research, and that they want to cooperate across research councils. In March of 2014, there was a BIS document which came out, which was the triannual review of all of the research councils. And it basically said, research councils are doing very well, they should be kept basically as they are, but they could do better at collaborating with each other. So I think this is partly a reaction to that, and partly a reaction to the general climate that the research councils should be talking and collaborating more with one another. Okay. What else? This is kind of the timescale for what's happening with revising, if you like, producing the next delivery plan. And it's this delivery plan which will detail the sorts of strategic themes, technical themes that EPSRC actually want to go for. You can see there are a number of ICT strategic advisory team meetings, there are visits to universities, there are workshops, etc., etc. And recently there was a workshop about, I think, a month and a half ago, and I was at one of these workshops, which is actually on big data, and these are typically the mechanisms which are used to collect information about what the appetite of the community is, and where the challenges are. So if you have a workshop in your area and you see one that's advertised, then please apply to go for it, to go to it, because it's where they take a lot of their information from about what capability, what appetite there is in the community. If they don't see many people coming along to one of these workshops in a particular area, then they then become uncertain about, say, maybe having a special call in that area because they don't think there's much appetite in that area within the UK. So it's really important to go along to these workshops and essentially show the interest of your community in that particular area. Okay. Strategic goals are research and discover, research and innovate. This is, I think, looking much more towards impact. So it's a bit like EU in terms of they're focusing more on impact. That's just the way the world is at the moment. They need impact in order to convince government ministers to continue to fund research within the UK. And government funding is becoming very, very critical. There are certain ring-fenced areas, etc., etc., etc. And it's not known whether the research councils will get the level cash settlement that they did the last time round. And that money was actually ring-fenced as well. It's not known whether it will be ring-fenced, and it's not known whether we'll get the level cash settlement or not. Just it depends on the politicians and how much money the country has. Okay. There's strategies are balancing capability. This used to be shaping capability, which really means they're going to put priorities on these bubbles. Building leadership means doing things like providing fellowships and things like that, and building up individuals. And accelerating impact, this is, again, their agenda of trying to find out what impact our research actually makes so that they can publicise it, so that they can show ministers and the public that the research is doing good things. Okay. In terms of main priorities for ICT theme, yes, I picked up this one here because, again, it's interdisciplinary, cross-disciplinary, so there is more emphasis on cross-disciplinary stuff. A little depends on your peers in terms of how they review the proposals. It takes time for this multidisciplinary nature to creep through into the peer review. Key strategic areas. Right, okay, so don't be frightened about these because there were 3 strategic areas in the previous delivery plan, and those were photonic systems, parallel systems, and what's the last one? Anybody know? Question to the crowd. Parallel systems, photonics, and it will come to me. Towards intelligent information infrastructure. All right. So those were the 3 technical themes. Right. That did not mean to say that the bubbles which did not contribute to those themes were downgraded. It was just seemed to be an emphasis they had. So these are very, very top level, and I think with most of these things, you can see the way that the bubbles would feed into these in some way. So these are very, very broad definitions. But these are headlines in order to try and get the attention of government ministers and biz for funding purposes, etc. And these are, if you like, an easy sell with the underlying technologies that EPSRC have. Okay, I mentioned that I went to a big data workshop about a month and a half ago, and this was one of the results of that workshop. And as you would expect, there's quite a lot in terms of algorithms, but there was also a lot in terms of interacting with big data and sort of HCI type issues. And that kind of surprised me because I thought it would be much more kind of machine learning. So this is the result of a well-sorted exercise with the workshop participants, or about 40 participants. And what this does is it shows you, sort of gives you an overview of what the the participants' expertise was and their interests were. So up here what we had was, if you like, integrating big data sources. So this is very much about sort of semantic web type stuff up here. This was about algorithms. This was more about platforms and capability. And down here we had HCI and human aspects. So what surprised me was that there were so many people interested in this area, which was quite refreshing. And I think that surprised EPSRC as well, in terms of there is this capability within the UK and interest in this area within the UK. So these types of workshops do make an impact on EPSRC thinking. So as I said, if you get a chance to go to them, please do. Okay, this is the way that EPSRC views the world. So when you're putting in a proposal, then have a look at these areas, have a look at the statements behind the areas, and make sure that your impact and national importance statements align with what's in the text behind these areas.